Hey everybody, and welcome back to Fly Fish University TV. My name is Jordan Ulrich, and if you've never listened to our podcast, each and every Friday we do something called Q&A Friday. Take 3 questions from readers and listeners all around the world and answer them to the best of my capability. And I'm super excited to be migrating this from our podcast alongside Fly Fish University TV on our YouTube channel. Before we get started, I would love to invite you to download a free copy of my book, 7 Steps to Fly Fishing Success. We're going to cover some of the fundamentals of fly fishing that can really hinder people, and trust me, when you master these things, fly fishing becomes a lot more enjoyable, a lot easier. You spend a lot more time doing the right things on the water. So today we're talking rotary vices, we're talking blood knots versus surgeon's knots, and we're talking click pawl versus disc drag reels for trout fishing on lakes and rivers. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy today's episode. It is Friday, which means that it's time for another installment of Q&A Friday. Super exciting. One of my favorite things to do each and every week. I really look forward to taking and answering to the best of my ability fly fishing questions from all around the world to ultimately help make fly fishing a better experience. If you want to submit a question, you can just go to flyfishuniversity.com/questions. The list keeps getting bigger, but maybe down the road we'll expand it from 3 questions a day to 5 questions a day. So anyways, we've got 3 questions today. We're going to be talking rotary fly tying vices. We're going to be talking what are some of the advantages to blood knots versus surgeon's knots. And we are going to be talking disc drag versus click pawl reels for trout fishing, and what are some advantages and disadvantages. Again, these are just my personal opinions. I don't pretend to be, somebody who knows everything about fly fishing. Just here to try to help as many people as I possibly can enjoy this wonderful sport just a little bit more. It has definitely taken over my life since the time I was in my teens, and probably until the day that I enter my grave. So Mark from Abbotsford, BC says, I've been told to purchase a rotary fly tying vise, but I honestly don't know enough about them to make an educated decision. Are they worth the money? Thanks, your podcast has helped me immensely on the water. Okay, Mark, this is a great question. And rotary fly tying vices. So one thing that's really nice about the rotary vise, and the long and short of this would be, my answer would be yes, absolutely. It is worth your money to pick up a rotary vise. So I, in absolutely no affiliation of any way, I have tied on a Renzetti Traveler series. This is the 2200 series, and I've tied on this vise since 2010. So we're going on 11 years now. It is just an amazing tool. I love it so much. And a couple things that I really like about the rotary vise. The biggest thing is your ability to work with the underside of the fly without having to look underneath it. You can just flip your vise upside down, and then all of a sudden, the underside of the fly is easily accessible. This is a really nice feature to rotary vices. Another thing that I like quite a bit, I used to tie flies commercially, and if you're tying flies commercially, which I'm thankful that I don't anymore on a lot of levels, but if you are tying flies commercially, one of the things is that the faster you tie, the more you're going to make. So when I was in my late teens, maybe even into my early 20s, I'd do a ton of commercial orders. They would fund a lot of my fishing trips, and through the winter time, I would just kind of float myself through the winter by taking commercial tying orders. One of the things that I loved about them is if I was tying something like chronomids, for example, you can actually use the rotary feature on the vise to wrap your materials forward. So this meant that I was allowed to tie these nice, uniform looking flies really quickly. So I could get my orders done quicker, I could get paid quicker, I could get my flies into people's hands faster. Of course, I don't do that anymore, but it is a nice feature to have. If I'm wrapping forward something like a dubbing brush, I really enjoy having that rotary feature on the vise. So Mark, I hope that answers your question. I hope that that's valuable because I really do think rotary vices are very nice. They're a really nice feature to have. Second question comes from Michael. I don't know where he lives, but he asks, I understand the double surgeon's knot and the blood knot are here to serve the same purpose. And is there an advantage to tying one over the other if they do the exact same thing? What gives? That's a great question, Michael. So I am a fan of both the blood knot and the double surgeon's knot. Now, if you don't know how to tie either of those, I'm going to drop a link right below to our free knot tying course. It's called 6 Knots for Freshwater Fly Fishing. It's going to teach you really, especially if you're trout fishing, the only 6 knots that you're ever really going to need to know. So I would say that yes, there is for sure, and there's a reason why there's both knots included in the course. Now, the purpose for both of these knots is to basically join 2 tippets of a similar diameter. Okay, so if you're tying 6 pound to 8 pound, for example, 3X to 4X, we'll say, depending where you live, different terminology is more popular. So if you're tying 3X to 4X, the double surgeon's knot and the blood knot are both going to be an amazing choice. Now, if you're tying, say, in my experience, saltwater fly fishing, tarpon fishing, for example, we're tying like 100 pound to 20 pound, or 16 pound to 100 pound, or 16 pound to 80 pound. These knots are not really going to work in that in that application. There's some more advanced knots that we use for that. But if you are tying 2 tippets of a similar diameter, then both the blood knot and the double surgeon's knot are going to work very well. The blood knot, to me, I love the way that the blood knot looks. To me, it's a really, really nice, really slick looking knot. Now, one thing with the blood knot, it's a bit more tedious to tie. So when say the boat's rocking or your hands are cold, I definitely think it's at a bit of a disadvantage to the double surgeon's knot. I really do love the way that the blood knot seats. I love the way it looks when it gets pulled tight. But again, double surgeon's knot's a little bit faster to tie, a little bit easier to tie, especially if you've got cold hands. It's the double surgeon's knot's a really, really simple knot to tie. Now, this is kind of what separates it for me with the blood knot and the double surgeon's knot. So let's use the example that I'm fly fishing on a river and I've got a nymphing rig, okay? And let's say I've got a 9-foot leader down to maybe a split shot or something, and then I've got my fly down below there, another 18 inches. And let's say I'm fishing with a strike indicator or a bobber, whichever you like to call them. And I put a wind knot in my leader above my indicator. Okay, so what I'm gonna have to do is basically take, if the indicator's threaded onto the line, what I'm gonna have to do is basically take, cut my rig apart with to tie the double surgeon's knot. Okay, all I have to do, if I want to cut that wind knot out, which I would highly suggest that you make a great habit of taking wind knots, casting knots out. I like how we call them wind knots because it takes the pressure off the angler, it takes the responsibility off the angler. If you're going to take these wind knots out, which you should, the nice thing with a blood knot is all you have to do is cut either side of the wind knot, okay? And you can throw the blood knot in really quick, pull it tight. You don't have to take any of your rig off. So the one disadvantage to the double surgeon's knot is that you do have to pull the tag end of the knot through twice, which that is a bit of a hindrance because you would have to cut down your presentation and basically join these two together and then, add your split shot back on, add your fly back on, so on and so forth. So yeah, if your fly's already tied on, your leader's already set up, I really like the blood knot in this application. Okay, but if you're starting from scratch, you're just tying your leader up in the parking lot or something, definitely the double surgeon's great. Double surgeon's such a fast knot to tie. Okay, last one. Dave in Boise, Idaho says, what advantages are there to a click pawl versus a disc drag reel for trout fishing? I mostly fish lakes around Idaho, but would love to fish British Columbia one day. Well, Dave, if you like lake fishing, British Columbia is a great place to come. So what I would say is that in the realm of trout fishing, even salmon and steelhead fishing, for the most part, a lot of this is personal preference. I don't think that, I know people who all they fish is click pawl and they won't fish anything else. And then I know people who all they fish is disc drag, they won't fish anything else. Here's a couple points that I would say, okay? The nice thing the nice thing about a disc drag reel, so if I'm guiding anglers on the water, which I used to do a lot more of than I do now, mostly because I have kids. So if I'm guiding people on the water, okay, I like having the disc drag because the poundage, it never, the tension in which the fly line is going to come off of the reel never changes. So if I have a new angler who's never really fished a lot, then I really like to have this. I really like to have the disc drag set into a tension where I know that A, it's not going to backlash because it's too loose, and B, they're not going to be breaking fish off because it's set too tight. Now, when you move out of trout fishing, and a lot of times when we're trout fishing, especially for smaller fish, the reel is usually just a place to store the line. If you're not encountering a lot of fish that are going to be taking line off the reel, then for the most part, it's just a place to store the fly line. But as you get into bigger fish, and you're dealing with fish that are taking, 1 or a couple hundred feet, on a run sometimes, we'll encounter that in some of our trophy lakes for sure, where you'll have fish that will take these long, just absolute blistering runs. It's super fun. But again, especially in a lake, they're not going to go too far, right? So as long as you're not carelessly playing them out forever with your click pole, I really don't think there's a huge difference. I think a lot of it comes down to the angler. What do you like to fish? Now, of course, as you move into salt water, like you wouldn't have a very good time with a click pole reel fishing, say, giant trevally or something. You need that stopping power, or blue water species or tarpon or permit or anything. That stopping power is really, really nice. Again, there's maybe some people that would disagree with that. That's totally fine. These are, again, just my opinions. So anyways, I hope that this was valuable to you, and I really, really enjoy doing Q&A Friday. It's something I look forward to each and every week. If you like to submit a question, you can drop a comment to flyfishuniversity.com/questions, and I'd be super happy to answer. So you can write me directly via email at support@flyfishuniversity.com. It's super fun, one of my favorite things to do each and every week. And again, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Q&A Friday, and I wish you all the best next time you get to spend time on the water, whenever that is, whether it's next week or next month or hopefully sometime this year. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week.